She has done the world premiere episode of actually being on someone else's podcast. And the someone else her name is Jamie Kern Lima.
There are growing calls to strip Harry and Meghan of their royal titles. The New York Post is reporting that locals in the UK say enough is enough, especially after Prince Harry's disastrous BBC interview, which aired hours after he lost his appeal for taxpayer-funded UK.
And in the world premiere of podcast, Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, she pulled out all the stops. Here is the intro of the episode.
You're in America now, and we don't give a shit about you. You're not our fucking prince. You'll never be king. We hate your wife. Stay at home in your $29 million mansion, all right?
Malignant narcissist who cannot get enough of herself while she simultaneously plays the victim. My castle's too small. Yeah. The queen is mean to me. They won't let me call myself Her Royal Highness anymore, but I'm going to put it all over my stationery and on the gifts that I give to my friends. I just can't stand her. I just think she's such a phony.
Harry's digging an even bigger hole for himself here.
Well, I think he's dug so deep now, he'll strike water any day now.
William is reportedly formulating a plan to finally strip Prince Harry and Meghan Markle of their HRH title.
Planned from the beginning. She denied being interested in the royal family, which she totally was. I know someone who knows the ex-husband who said she had a vision board with Prince Harry on it. And
before they met?
Yes. And she wants to
That's
pretend.
impressive. You got to admit that is impressive.
Oh my God, I can't even. These two, Meghan and Harry, are the worst.
She slaughtered this weekend because there were some business cards in the back of one of her podcasts. She's still using her royal title, HRH, despite our late queen warning her against...
Unpack like an onion some of the things I'm interested in. I actually like the royal family. I think it's cool. So...
That's another thing. She killed the queen.
She did kill the queen.
In my opinion.
I agree with you.
Meghan. Hi. We're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
First want to just say congratulations to you on everything that you've done and everything that you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's been a very full, few months
Full
for
year.
sure. Yeah.
So this,
I think is absolutely infuriating in Buckingham Palace. It was agreed with Queen Elizabeth that they will not use the HRH title. That is a long-standing precedent, and there's good reason for it. Basically, the HRH is only given to working royals and senior members of the royal family.
Investor. We have the CEO of Netflix here. I did binge your show with Love Meghan. There's nothing you can't do, which is amazing. But talk about how this became a business.
Well, with, I think always credit where credit's due.
Meghan Markle just got roasted on The Daily Show, not by some random tabloid or conservative pundit, but by Jon Stewart himself. And the punchline, he called her a mini Brigitte Macron. See, the internet exploded, and not in Meghan's favor. It wasn't just a joke, it was the joke. A punchline so sharp, so specific, that it sliced through years of polished PR and landed right at the center of public sentiment. In a jaw-dropping segment that lit up Twitter and shook late-night TV, Jon Stewart took direct aim at the Duchess of Sussex, painting her as an overbearing, self-obsessed figure who's steering Prince Harry's downfall. The viral comparison to France's First Lady wasn't just a throwaway gag, it was a cultural gut punch. According to Stewart, both Meghan and Macron are experts in slapping their husbands into place, and the crowd went wild. But this wasn't just a roast. It was a signal, loud and clear, that the media tide has turned. Stewart, who's long been a respected voice for progressive America, ripped into Meghan's public image, mocked her flop podcast Confessions of a Female Founder, and questioned her brand of empowerment. He didn't just poke fun, he dismantled the myth. And Meghan, reportedly humiliated. This time, the public didn't rally behind her. No hashtags.
Gifts. One day Bella said, "There's a show here." And I hadn't at the onset thought that that was something that I wanted to share in that way. And creatively, we worked as partners to really find a way for it to land and for me to be able to share it and just have fun, which is really...
No mass defense, just silence and memes. And that might be the most telling sign yet of where her celebrity image is headed. So what does this mean for Meghan's standing in US pop culture? Why did this segment hit so hard? And could this be the moment her carefully curated brand finally collapsed under its own weight? Let's break it all down. After that viral roast, the first thing Jon Stewart zeroed in on was Meghan's podcast, Confessions of a Female Founder. And let's just say, he didn't hold back. Meghan launched the podcast with a lot of flair. Branded as a deep dive into the minds of female entrepreneurs, it was meant to showcase vulnerability, hustle, and lessons from the front lines of business. The message: Meghan was no longer just a duchess. She was a builder, a boss, a founder. But here's the twist. The public didn't quite buy it. From the first episode, listeners pointed out how the show felt overly polished, full of vague empowerment slogans, but light on real insight. Critics weren't kind either. One outlet described it as a masterclass in self-congratulation, while another called it stomach-turning corporate feminism in yoga pants. And then came Jon Stewart's knockout line: it's less female founder, more foundering female. That hit hard, not just because it was funny, but because it echoed what so many people were already whispering. Meghan wasn't sharing the raw, unfiltered truth of building something from scratch. She was talking about struggle from a place of privilege, without ever really showing the struggle. Behind the scenes, the numbers told the real story. After a spike during launch week, Confessions quietly slid off Spotify's top 100. Reviews across platforms dropped below 3 stars. Social media called it tone-deaf, scripted, and nothing we haven't heard 100 times before. And here's what makes this especially damaging. This wasn't Meghan's first media venture.
And grind. How do you care for yourself?
Oh, thank you for asking that. Well, look, I think part of what's really, really important is that love language of taking care of people also really feeds me. And I think that is in many ways part of my self-care, which can feel.
This was supposed to be her reintroduction, a proof of concept that she could succeed outside the royal bubble on her own terms. But instead of a breakout hit, the podcast became another entry in a growing list of underwhelming projects. No viral moments, no big revelations, no real traction. So, when Stewart brought it up on The Daily Show, the audience laughed. Not just because it was a joke, but because they already knew it was true. He wasn't punching down. He was holding up a mirror. And that sting, it hit even harder because it wasn't some exaggerated criticism. It was a reflection of how far her star had dimmed in the eyes of the public. But that wasn't the only failed crown jewel in Meghan's brand portfolio. Her next project, it didn't just flop, it vanished altogether. Before Confessions of a Female Founder fizzled out, there was another high-profile project Meghan had pinned her comeback hopes on: Pearl, her animated series for Netflix. Announced back in 2021 with major buzz, Pearl was supposed to be a charming, inspirational show following a 12-year-old girl who draws strength from famous women in history. The concept had all the right ingredients: girl power, legacy, education, and Meghan's signature message of empowerment. Netflix proudly backed it as one of Archewell Productions' flagship projects. Meghan was not just involved, she was the executive producer, the creative voice, and the face of the brand. Headlines celebrated her transition from royal to media mogul. This wasn't just a cartoon, it was a statement. But here's the plot twist: Pearl never made it to air. By mid-2022, the show was quietly shelved. Netflix, in the midst of internal cutbacks, started trimming its animated content, and Pearl was among the casualties. For Meghan, it was an embarrassing blow.
Doesn't feel like a typical stand-and stir, which we all remember from back in the days. We stand, look at camera, and you're stirring something. I didn't necessarily want to do that, and I didn't want a reality show. And so the only way to feel as though you were still in conversation with me, I felt, was I had to be talking to the people in the room with me. And that was
the media had hyped it, fans were waiting, and then radio silence. One day it existed, the next it didn't. Worse, rumors swirled that the cancellation wasn't just about budget cuts. According to industry chatter, Netflix execs weren't convinced Pearl had strong storytelling legs. Some claimed the show's early development lacked clarity, while others hinted that the pitch leaned more into Meghan's branding than actual substance. And just when things seemed to settle, controversy came knocking. In 2025, British author Mel Elliott came forward, claiming Meghan's Pearl bore striking similarities to her children's book series, Pearl Power. Elliott didn't file a lawsuit, but she made her point clear. She felt her work had been repurposed without credit. And while Meghan's team dismissed it as coincidence, the optics weren't great. Another ambitious idea, another PR headache. For Meghan, Pearl was supposed to be proof that she could create content with purpose, that she could build something lasting. Instead, it became another tick on a growing list of unrealized promises. And when Jon Stewart referenced Pearl during his roast, he didn't even need to elaborate. The audience already knew. The mention of her shelved cartoon got laughs. Not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. It was yet another project that didn't deliver. And with 2 media misses in a row, the public started asking a hard question. Is Meghan building a brand or just collecting headlines? Meanwhile, Prince Harry was facing a very different kind of fallout, one that didn't involve Netflix or podcasts, but police protection and legal battles. While Meghan's media ventures were making headlines for all the wrong reasons, Prince Harry was in the spotlight too.
As though it was the perfect complement for what I was building at this point in my life. Between the series and between the brand, I thought, how interesting is it to be able to listen to the conversations of someone building a business while they're doing it? And that includes...
But not for any career move or public appearance. This time, it was about something far more personal and political. Harry had taken the UK government to court. The issue? He wanted his taxpayer-funded police protection back for when he and his family visit the United Kingdom. After stepping down from royal duties, he lost automatic access to the elite security detail that comes with being an active royal. And he wasn't happy about it. He argued that he still faced serious risks, especially during public engagements in the UK. But in May 2025, the High Court delivered its verdict. No, the ruling was clear. Harry no longer qualifies for automatic police protection. The court stated that while he remains a high-profile individual, he is no longer a working royal. Translation: you made your choice. And with that choice came consequences. And then came Jon Stewart's jab. In the same segment where he roasted Meghan, Stewart turned his attention to Harry and delivered a brutal one-liner that stopped the room. He's an unemployed immigrant who gave up his family, his home, and even his dog. It was sharp, it was cold, and it got big laughs. Because once again, it wasn't just a joke, it was a reflection. The prince who once represented modern royalty, who served in the military, launched the Invictus Games, and carried the world's sympathy after Diana's death, was now being described as a man trailing behind his wife at brand launches and charity dinners. The reaction was instant.
What the 3PL was going to have in the tissue paper, but I needed to see it and feel it. I needed my hands in it, which I think is part of, for me, my authentic self is really being involved in the creative and the granular. So I went online, I bought all these cardboard boxes, bought all the tissue paper and the filler and everything that should...
Memes of Harry holding Meghan's handbag started flooding TikTok. Reddit threads labeled him Prince of Los Angeles, with side-by-side photos of his royal past and his influencer present. On social media, people debated whether Stewart had crossed a line or simply said what many were already thinking. The sad part? The narrative is shifting. Harry was once the relatable royal, the cool one who walked away for love and freedom. Now, he's being painted as a man adrift, cut off from his roots, struggling to find relevance, and overshadowed by a partner whose brand seems to be crumbling under its own weight. And the worst part for the Sussexes? This wasn't tabloid spin. This was coming from mainstream comedy, from a voice their supporters once trusted, but this wasn't just a one-night hit. Poll numbers, press coverage, and public sentiment started to show something even bigger was happening. The tide wasn't just turning, it was turning fast. It wasn't long ago that Meghan Markle was seen as a cultural reset, a modern royal, a symbol of progress, a woman who stood up and spoke out. But the buzz? It's fading, fast. And now we're seeing the receipts in cold, hard numbers. Recent polls out of the US show Meghan's approval rating slipping to 41%. That's a major drop from the highs she enjoyed after the Oprah interview, when she was framed as a victim of outdated royal protocols and tabloid cruelty. Prince Harry, once more popular than his brother, is now lagging too, hovering in the mid-50s and sinking with every awkward headline. But here's what really stings for the Sussexes. The US media, which once treated them like untouchable celebrities, has started to turn. Major outlets that used to write glowing profiles now run think pieces with headlines like, "Has Meghan overplayed her hand?" or "When empowerment starts to feel like marketing." Even late-night hosts beyond Jon Stewart have dipped their toes in the roast pool. SNL ran a sketch last week poking fun at Harry's emotional support handbag duties, and a Drew Barrymore show panel ended with an awkward silence when Meghan's podcast was brought up. Translation: the once impenetrable Sussex shield is cracking. And this isn't just about bad press, it's about perception. Meghan's personal brand was built on empowerment, authenticity, and resilience. But the moment audiences start feeling like it's more performance than principle, the magic wears off.
Well, let's see this. And that really does come out in your show. You obviously have to just let some things go. I love that you're...
Even social media, once her strongest base, is shifting. TikTok is flooded with commentary videos mocking her scripted interviews and Harry's transformation from bold royal to brand ambassador. Hashtags like Why Sussex Fatigue and Foundering Female are trending, not as hate campaigns, but as signs that the public is simply exhausted. And Meghan's silence? It's not helping. No interviews, no clarifications, no pivots. Just a quiet rollout of carefully curated lifestyle content that feels increasingly out of sync with the headlines. The biggest red flag? The laughter. When Jon Stewart mocked Meghan, the crowd didn't groan. They didn't push back. They laughed. Loud. That's not scandal. That's satire. And satire is dangerous because it reflects what people already feel. Just louder. The public isn't canceling Meghan and Harry. They're disengaging, which in the world of celebrity branding might be worse. But this detachment isn't just happening online. It's bleeding into brand deals, streaming platforms, and even their newest ventures, where data is starting to reveal a harsh reality. People are tuning out. If Jon Stewart's roast was the spark, social media turned it into a wildfire. Within hours of the Daily Show segment airing, hashtags like #Mini Macron, #Control Queen, and #Foundering Female began trending across TikTok and Twitter. But it wasn't just the hashtags. It was the tone of the content that really said it all. People weren't angry, they were laughing. Clips from Meghan's red carpet moments were stitched with Brigitte Macron's infamous hand-swatting scene.
I think as a working mom, and again, these are 3 projects that we're all launching really at the same time. So the behind the scenes for the past year and a half have been incredibly busy and ambitious, but to see it all come to life and try to give yourself the space and the grace to make mistakes, to know.
TikTok creators reenacted Jon Stewart's roast with dramatic music and over-the-top acting. On Instagram, reels popped up with side-by-side comparisons of Meghan speaking about empowerment and Harry quietly standing beside her, purse in hand. Reddit threads labeled the roast comedy gold and called it the moment the emperor lost her wardrobe. Some users pointed out the irony. Meghan had worked so hard to control her narrative. Carefully worded interviews, Netflix specials, picture-perfect photo shoots, and yet one 10-second joke had completely reset the conversation. And it didn't stop there. Comedy Central's official upload of The Daily Show roast hit over 5 million views in just 48 hours, making it one of their top-performing clips of the year. That kind of reach is no joke. It's the kind of virality that brands pay millions to create. Only in this case, Meghan and Harry were on the receiving end, and not in a good way. Even more telling, late-night ratings. Viewership for Stewart's episode spiked by 7% over the monthly average, with social engagement numbers breaking internal benchmarks. In simpler terms, people weren't just laughing. They were watching, sharing, discussing. It wasn't just a moment. It was a shift. But here's where it gets brutal. This level of online attention didn't translate into renewed interest in Meghan's projects. Her podcast didn't see a spike. Her lifestyle brand, as ever, didn't trend. What did trend? Edits of Stewart's unemployed immigrant line about Harry and memes captioned, "When your podcast flops, but you're still trying to act inspired." The public wasn't just reacting, they were participating. The roast gave them a punchline, and they turned it into a movement. A digital, meme-fueled movement fueled by eye rolls, secondhand cringe, and open mockery. And once that kind of energy takes over online, it's nearly impossible to stop, because memes don't care about image. They don't care about titles or PR teams, they just spread. Fast. Which brings us to the biggest question of all. Can a brand built on control survive once the narrative slips out of your hands? While Meghan tried to reframe the conversation with something new, her lifestyle brand as ever, the timing couldn't have been worse.
Gifts. One day Bella said, "There's a show here." And I hadn't at the onset thought that that was something that I wanted to share in that way. And creatively, we worked as partners to really find a way for it to land and for me to be able to share it and just have fun, which is really.
The brand launched quietly, with a sleek website, minimalistic home goods, and a heavy focus on intentional living. Some of the first drops sold out, sure, but attention didn't last long, because instead of media buzz about her products, headlines focused on something else entirely. Jon Stewart's roast, still trending. Meghan later admitted in an interview that launching the brand had been incredibly lonely and overwhelming. She framed the process as hands-on, even saying she picked out tissue paper herself. But critics weren't moved. Why? Because the audience had already clocked out. To them, As Ever wasn't a brand built from grit. It felt more like another extension of the Sussex image machine, carefully curated, perfectly styled, but disconnected from reality. Especially when you're operating out of a $14 million Montecito mansion while preaching mindfulness and minimalism. Investors took notice too. Industry insiders began questioning whether As Ever had the momentum or credibility to scale. Meanwhile, Meghan's podcast was still flatlining, and Harry's headlines were all about security losses and social media memes. All this added up to one harsh truth. The Sussex brand wasn't evolving. It was unraveling. And just when things couldn't get any worse, Meghan and Harry's last stronghold, their US media protection, was about to take a hit too. Jon Stewart didn't just deliver a joke, he delivered a verdict. The moment he called Meghan a mini Brigitte Macron, it wasn't about laughs, it was about legacy. A public takedown by one of the most respected liberal voices signaled something the Sussexes hadn't faced before: open mockery from the very audience that once protected them. And the silence that followed, that said everything. No statements, no rebuttals, no spin. Because when satire hits this hard, it sticks. Not because it's mean, but because it rings true. The carefully built image of empowerment, rebellion, and purpose just got peeled back, and what people saw underneath didn't inspire them. It made them laugh. But here's the real damage. Once a public figure becomes a punchline, it's incredibly hard to bounce back, especially when the platforms that helped build your fame, media, podcasts, streaming, are the very ones now fueling the backlash. So what happens next? Maybe Meghan will try to pivot, maybe Harry will retreat further, maybe they'll double down. But one thing is certain, the myth has cracked. And what comes after may not be royal or revolutionary, just relatable for all the wrong reasons. The Sussex story is no longer a fairy tale, it's a cautionary tale about brand, burnout, and the brutal power of public perception.